Welcome to the first podcast of 2025, the year of our Lord. And today we're going to do a little something different, a little callback to what we'll call a best of advice show. So as you may know by now, the last question we ask or give to our guests is, what is something you'd recommend to artists who are Christians? And maybe I'll just comment on that phrase first. I like the kind of quote that Christian is a terrible adjective, but great noun, right? So Christian art or Christian movies or Christian music may have bad connotations in your brain, but we want to be Christians. That's who we are, who are also artists, who are doing something unique, hopefully robust, profound, and moving, compelling, and beautiful. And so that's why we ask that question that way. Mm-hmm. Artists who call themselves Christian.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the best of advice show. What do our guests have to say to those of us who are artists?
Yeah, this is a show for all the people that wait for the movie to come out when a book is written.
That's right.
Like this, you want just give me what I need to know. Like this is it. This is the best of. This is, and every time we heard one of our guests, in the show in this particular way, it just seemed like, man, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
So here it is, like right to the good stuff.
That's right. Enjoy. Our first piece of advice comes from Dr. David Taylor, who doesn't like to be called doctor, but I'm going to call him that anyway.
That's right. Yeah.
And he's a professor at Fuller Theological Seminary. He does a lot in the theology and the arts space, author of Prayers for the Pilgrimage, and among other things. He's a great voice. Here he is on what he would say to artists who call themselves Christian artists. So you'll have the last word. What's something you want to share to artists who call themselves Christian?
I mean, I'll say two things. One, thank you. We love you. We appreciate you. We admire you. We respect you. Hang in there. Don't give up. Okay, that's what I would say as a pastor. It's what I did say. I would say a third of my job as a pastor was encouragement. It was just like straight up, like, hang in there. Don't give up. Hang in there. Don't give up. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I would say, and I would say this, like maybe as a theologian priest, I would say, take your faith seriously, take your art seriously, take your relationships seriously. And if you take those three things seriously, and by that I mean take them with faith, hope, and love, you'll discern what you need to be in this season of your life, because you can't be everything in every season of life. And every season opens up and closes down possibilities for you to flourish. But if you take your faith seriously, by which I mean take God seriously, you take your art seriously, take your craft seriously, take your relationships, the people that are around you that you trust that they're the provision of God's grace in your life rather than a deficit. And maybe there are other people in other parts of the world that you can be kindred with, but you take those relationships seriously. Together, I think they create sort of a matrix for discerning, what am I to be on about in this season? How can I flourish? What can I say yes to? And by grace, what can I say no to? Right? And then just let it go or hold lightly and trust that it's not a no forever, but maybe a no in this season of life. And there is goodness and life that God has for you in this season of your life. That's what I would say.
This piece of wisdom comes from the art extraordinaire Matthew Milner. He's a professor of art history at Wheaton College, author of several books, including some on indigenous people, Mary, the Mother of God, art history. Here he is. He's great.
If you wouldn't mind, we end in this way typically. Would you have a word for artists who would consider themselves Christian?
Yes.
Yeah. What would you say?
I do. So what I would say is, if the question was theological, someone said, I don't want to be a theologian, I would say to that person, you must apprentice yourself to one of the ancient doctors of the church, right? You apprentice yourself to Gregory of Nyssa, to Julian of Norwich. And I mean, you read them not just once, but 5 times, and then go back again, right? You really develop a relationship with that figure. And so what I would simply say to artists is apprentice yourself to one of the classic iconographical motifs of the church. You can find them. I love my friends at St. Paul's Orthodox Monastery. You can find it Skeet with a K, skeet.com, or just look St. Paul's. These are a bunch of Wisconsin monks who make the icons cheaply available to people in relatively nice machine production. And so what they're doing is they're taking the equivalent of St. Augustine or Gregor of Nazianzus, these great theologians, and these canonized visual ideas and making them available to people. The great Sinai Pantocrator icon. Go to the St. Catherine's Monastery icon database. That monastery is doing all they can, whether through the Index of Medieval Art in Princeton or through now even another project that they're trying to make their icons available. Go to the classic forms of Orthodox iconography and apprentice yourself to that. Please understand, I don't mean imitate it and become an iconographer. That would be great if you want to do that. It's a whole difficult level of skill that you could pursue. But be in conversation with that. Get one of those icons, put them up in your studio, and say, and again, you don't have to just even translate them into contemporary. Just let that classic Orthodox beauty surround your world. Some Eastern Orthodox will tell you, well, those belong to us. They don't belong to you. You need to become Orthodox. And I would say that's almost as absurd as me saying, well, you don't get to read the Bible. That belongs to Protestants. Now, I know they would say, well, no, we have wrote the Bible. And it's like, I get it. I know they would retort with that. But I'm saying all these things belong to us. So thanks to the internet, we have a whole mess of problems that we've never had before. Mm-hmm. Thanks to the internet, we have a whole slew of resources in the classic iconographical motifs that are available to us like never before. Find them and then say, you know what? I'm just going to take the classic Transfiguration icon, put it up, and I'm going to say, may my work serve that mystery. May it serve that mystery. Right? That's what Raphael did in his Transfiguration. It is a translation and a humble submission before the Orthodox icon of the Transfiguration. So that would be my answer, is that these riches belong to all of us. Take advantage of that. Step into Orthodox churches and worship with them. Even if you're not Orthodox yourself, go fill and fuel your mind with as much beauty as possible in order to fuel your creative practice.
Nice.
Beautiful. Dr. Milliner, thanks so much for being with us. I wish we could talk for days, but alas, our time is up. But thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your wisdom and sharing with us.
Thanks to both of you.
Next one up is our second guest, Jennifer Allen Kraft, who teaches at Point University and speaks a lot on placemaking in the arts. She has a book by that name in IVP, and here she is. The last question we ask is kind of a note to artists. If, artists listening here, could be about placemaking, could be about just to artists. What's something you want them to know or to take?
Yeah, I guess I would just say, keep doing what you're doing. It's important. I wanted to go to art school when I was thinking about going to college, and I was a new Christian at the time, and a mentor in my church gave me the advice that art school wasn't a good place for a Christian woman to be. She had several reasons for that. It was terrible advice, but I took it because I didn't know better, and I came to realize through, reading people like Jeremy Begbie and Nicholas Wolterstorff and, all these people who are engaged in theology and the arts, that actually being an artist and being involved in the arts might actually be the perfect thing for a Christian woman to do. Led me on this whole trajectory in many ways, even pre-Wendell Berry. But I think that experience has shaped the way that what advice I might give to artists, and particularly to Christian artists, is that your work is needed, and that art is actually precisely the place where you need to be, because it's important for you as someone who is trying to live better in the place that they're a part of, but it's also important for the communities and the places around you, that it impacts them in real and significant and theological ways.
Good. All right. Well, Jennifer, Dr. Alan Kraft. Thank you for your time. Thanks for all your wisdom. A lot to chew on, think about, and really grateful for your scholarship, your wisdom and time. Really grateful.
And contributing to our book.
That's right. Yeah, let's not forget that.
Thank you so much.
Don't buy it for us. Buy it for Dr.
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, it's really, but I've read it. I can say it's worth the purchase. So yeah,
thank you.
Everybody should.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Really grateful.
Up next, we have Hans Boersma. He is a professor at Nashotah Theological Seminary and also authors tons of books that are in the show notes. So, yeah, you don't want to miss this. Listen to what Hans has to say.
Running out of time. Last question. We have guests kind of have the last word, which is basically a note to artists who call themselves Christian. What's something that you would want to tell them?
Offer people hope. Don't despair. There's lots in this world to despair about. And there's lots perhaps in your own life to despair about. Don't give in to despair. You're God's instrument of grace. So be an instrument of grace and offer beauty and lead people to beauty. Be a hopeful person.
It's good.
Thank you so much.
That's a good way to end.
That's a good way to end.
Yeah.
We live in hope.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Boersma. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been a real joy being with you again.
Mako Fujimura is next up. He is a practicing artist of world renown and author of Art and Faith, Culture Making, among others, a great winsome voice in this space. And here he is. The last question we ask, which is just to give you the final word, we're targeting we want Christians who are artists to listen. What would be a word that you would want to leave them with? What advice, what encouragement would you want to say to them?
Yeah, I write about this in my book, Art and Faith, but the word new in biblical terms, so, we in Christ we're a new creation, right? Kainos, creation, and also another word, Greek word is neos, but they both point to this extravagant newness or paradigmatic newness, that so I talk about newness in biblical terms is not a new iPhone, a new clothes or new car. It's something of newness that breaks open how we even in a limited view try to define that word. So it's not just a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It's a new entirely new way of looking at a species, and so we don't understand it. Like we say, well, this is new, but in the gospel, which is newness, we preach it as if it's just new, it's a new thing that you can kind of understand with your mind and, put it in your little box, and then Jesus is going to help you with that. Well, I don't think so. I think it's just so mind-blowing. It would literally transform you, if you imbibe it. And the Eucharist is, this reality that breaks in through ordinary bread and wine, which I note in the book, by the way, you have to make them to have this experience. And God somehow waits until human beings create. Wine is kind of difficult to make, it might take generations. And so God waits until we make to show up, right? And so I think of that newness as a way to reframe our lives and how we see the world, as your book is about, and how we might move forward in any person, right, who is open to this experience can experience that in their own way, and it's not
prescribed. It's an adventure. It's mystery. It's something that, you know, we are privileged to be part of, and we have to share that, because, you know, that person has a perspective that I don't, or you don't. So those are things that I think about as an artist, and I feel like that would be one word, you know, kainos.
Good. And next we have Jessica Hooten-Wilson, the amazing professor, but also a great writer, one of our favorite authors, Flannery O'Connor, and she had some great advice that I know you'll appreciate. So here's Dr. Jessica Hooten-Wilson.
All right, last question. We end every time with just you having the last word. We want to encourage artists or challenge artists, and so what's something that you want to leave with artists? What's something you want to kind of communicate to Christians who call themselves artists?
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm sure that you sent me that question, but I'm still, my life is such with 4 kids and traveling every weekend that I did not read the questions before we got here. So this is going to just come from the heart and is
That's
not
great.
a deeply
That's great.
pre-planned thing. But yeah. But I have a lot of student artists that are in my class. And I think that the desire to make something that is going to become their vocation and become their life oftentimes puts up more blinders than it should when it comes to making their art, because they either feel like they cannot be influenced by other artists because they have to be original and they have to say something unique, and they're going to have imposter syndrome if they're trying to imitate the things that have come before them. And they also have to speak into this time and place and what will sell and what, you know, so there's all these different eyes that are upon them. And one of the best things that I recently read was from, and I'm going to say it incorrectly, the Chuang Ta, which is an ancient Taoist parable. I'm trying to learn Asian great texts because I only mostly teach Western tradition. And so I'm learning these Asian texts. And one of the things that there's an artist in the text, and the artist has to make a wooden bell. And if he doesn't do it correctly, basically he'll be executed. So like the stakes are rather high. So think about like the pressure to make something and how much that's there compared to even like artists that you guys are talking to and speaking to. This is high pressure. And so what he does in order to make this bell is he fasts for 3 days. He relinquishes, he lets go. And after 3 days, he forgets those consequences. And then after 5 days of fasting, he forgets the fear of what people think. He forgets the fame and the rewards and the things that would come to him if he did this well. And then after 7 days of fasting, he forgets himself. And it is only at that point when he relinquishes himself that he walks out into the wood and he touches trees, and whichever one says, I want to be a bell, he carves into the bell. And so he makes it so well that people are like, this looks like it's made by a god or a spirit, right? But I think there's a lot of Christian ways of reading that parable. We have to be able to relinquish and to let go in order to really receive the art we're supposed to make. And it can't just be about fame and reward, and it can't just be about the money we need to make from it, and it can't be the expectations of those around us. Like, we have to let go and die to self when it comes to being able to make something that the Lord wants us to make, right? And I think that kind of relinquishing is probably the best way forward for artists.
That's beautiful.
Good.
I'm sure you would have crafted a perfect response, but I think that one was pretty good too. All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was good.
Well, thanks so much for your time and all your wisdom. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's more to talk about. There's more to read from you. I'll put some show notes of all the work that you do.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, blessings on y'all, blessing on your listeners, and look forward to seeing you in person soon.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Wes Vanderloot leads a Theology in the Arts program at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. Recently came out with a book, Beauty is Oxygen. And here he is giving you his wisdom.
All right, we'd like to ask one last question, the last word from you, our guest, which is, what's one thing you'd want to tell Christians who are artists?
Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. God will not love you more or less on the basis of what you create or how it's received, but God wants you to create and has freed you to create. And so there's joy in that, joy of the freedom that we have in Christ. And we can release the fear of results, release the fear of sort of expectations, and place those in God's hands. Just to go back to Leaf by Niggle, Tolkien's story, I think what's so wonderful about that story is, this artist thought he was a failure. He never finished the tree, and really depressed about what he actually was able to accomplish in life. And then when at the end of the story, when he's passed through death and he's on the other side and he encounters his complete tree in God's new heaven and new earth, and realized that that everything he was working on was just a signpost, was participation in God's work of new creation, it just filled him with joy. And I think that vision of the future, of the God who completes our impartial work, the God who perfects us and glorifies us, can give us so much hope and meaning, and it can free us to not be afraid.
And Natalie Carnes, one of a professor wrote a book several years ago, and one of my favorites, St. Gregory of Nyssa, and has an amazing wealth of knowledge and great advice. So we will wrap it up with Dr. Carnes.
The final question we ask is kind of giving you the last word. What would you want to communicate to artists who are Christian or artists in the church?
Yeah. That is, thank you for that question. I mean, I guess I would want them to pick up on that Nicenian challenge from Gregory of Nyssa, to nurture an art that speaks deeply to the gifts given to the church and also to the situation of the church and that we find ourselves in today. One of the things that I'm working on right now is I'm finishing a draft of the manuscript co-written with my husband on poverty in art and how it is Christians can justify making and supporting the art in a world where people die of unmet need. And it's thinking about how it is to be an artist is a vocation different than a vocation to, for example, voluntary poverty or to a life of corporal works of mercy. And yet in Christianity, we believe that gifts aren't the same thing as like a division of labor where you take care of art and I'll take care of poverty, but instead our charisms are meant to mutually inform one another. So as you seek communities by which you might be formed, think about those communities as including artists, and also maybe be in the same community, maybe in a different community, as including people who do feel themselves called to a kind of life committed to the corporal works of mercy. And then the other, related to the Attunement Project, part of the role that I see for artists is in having this role as maybe constructive theologians is too logocentric, but artists is having a role in helping to renew the Christian witness in a way that forms a kind of more hospitable center to the Christian church. I'm very interested in the history of feminist theology, which begins in the realization that the battles for gender equality are fought and won in the symbolic imagination. We've got to talk about metaphor and symbol and image, and all of those were like early themes in feminist theology in a time when they weren't in the rest of the theological world. And a lot of feminist theologians, the pioneers now, are like writing novels and memoirs and doing weird kind of creative things, which I think is kind of continuous with this artistic impulse. And I think it's because a lot of where the Christian theological work is done is not just in the kind of writing of theological treatises, but in mediating the Christian story anew, various forms of art. And so you artists are part of mediating that story. And so I guess I exhort you and commend you to that vocation and to take it seriously, because it's important for those of us who are just doing the writing work of theology as well.
Thank you guys for listening in these episodes we've had. We started it. We had a hurricane in the midst of it. We thank you for your patience and your ears, and we'll keep this going. We have some great guests lined up, and I think we'll probably do another kind of one of these recaps after a few of those episodes. But yeah, stay tuned in. There's some great people coming your way.